Japanese, when they come in over Ford Island, they would make a turn to the right and go around. Actually, because that's where most of the action was, on to the right of it, and we were back on the other side. But there's one that came our direction. I don't know how he got lost. He fired a few rounds, I guess, at several of us, and he passed over. The bullets hit the forecastle up on there. Of course, it hit that steel deck, which is about 3/4 inch thick, and of course the bullet hit it and just bounced off, and nobody was hurt, not even the ship. So, that was the only one that came our way, but because all the rest of them, they made a turn to the right and circled back to where their flotilla was. The Japanese wasn't the ones that got me. We were out in the South Pacific, and don't ask me where because there's no signpost out there for me. But we got caught in one of those big tornadoes, and the cooks could not cook. It was so rough, and all they could do is make coffee and bologna sandwiches. We ate that 3 times a day, and we were ready to quit bologna sandwiches when we got out of that, I tell you that. But I was started down a ramp or a stairwell with some stuff in my hands, and as I come out of when I started down, one of those big waves, they told me later, that was well over 100 feet high, hit the ship and rocked it, and it threw me over the railing, and I come all that way down and hit on my knees on that steel deck. And of course, it wasn't long till my knees looked like footballs or better. I had got to where I was in the sick bay most of the time, but I had got to where I could get around fairly well, and I couldn't walk too much. Of course, I had crutches I could walk on if I needed them. But after the attack, the doctor told me, he said, I just don't have the facilities and the stuff to treat you with here. So I asked the chief doctor there about going back to sea, and he'd pick up a folder and look at it, and he said, no, you're not ready to go back yet. And so after several rounds of that, I got to wondering if that's really my folder he's picking up, or he's just picking up one and looking at it. And then I sat down and asked him one day why he wouldn't let me go, and then he said, well, I'll tell you the truth. He said, I'm never going to authorize you to go back to sea. He said, I'll authorize you to go to shore duty, but he said, I'm not ever going to let you go back to sea, because he said, I asked him why, and he said, I don't think those knees is going to hold up for you. Then I called him, and I got to dating one of the nurses there. Of course, she's born and raised in Minnesota. And I said, would you like to go back to Texas and go to Texas? And she took about 2 steps and said, yeah, I think I would. I got Oswald ready to go. He wanted to put that black sweater on that he had on. Told him, I said, Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are, because he had a marksman's rating in the Marines, and he started laughing about that. That tickled him. But when I walked into the basement where Ruby was, when all the reporters and the police officers, when I turned the corner there, facing Ruby, and I recognized him, but he had that pistol in his left hand, mashed against his left leg. But all of those reporters and police officers in there, they wasn't looking down. They were looking up here to see when I come in to see what he looked like. But he switched that gun over like that to his right hand, and I knew immediately what was going to happen. So I tried to grab Ruby. I got my hand on his shoulder, and then L.C. Graves, the officer on the other side, he reached over and grabbed that right hand. With his left hand, he grabbed it here, In his right hand, he grabbed the cylinder of that pistol. But he had already moved over enough, and Ruby was still working his finger on the trigger trying to get off a shot. And if he had got him off, I'd have caught him somewhere right along in here. And so like I tell people that if my partner hadn't grabbed that cylinder, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.